Hey, what's going on, YouTube family, and welcome to our very first video. I am Juju.
And I'm Atha, and today we're going to be sharing with you guys on how we got married in a span of 4 months.
So, a little backstory behind us. I'm a musician and she's a dancer.
We were always surrounded by each other, like because we were in the ministry scene, in like high school and our young adult life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, we're still young adults, but we were always surrounded by each other, or we were always in similar circles. So,
But two different cities. She's from Miami. I'm from Broward, so completely different counties or cities. So counties.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
So, counties and cities.
It's the same thing.
Okay. So we were always with each other, or not always with each other, but we were always around each other, and but we never like had conversation. It was just high and by. I knew he existed, he knew I existed, but that's about as much like interaction there was between us. So our first initial encounter was at Gulfstream in 2021, and this was like November 12th. I was out with a friend and he was out on a gig. He was doing top 40 gigs. He was like, going on a break, and I was supposed to go to karaoke with my friend, but our room wasn't open. So we went downstairs to like kind of walk around a little bit to pass time. And my friend saw him. She was like, "Oh my goodness, it's Juju, so-and-so, whatever." And I was like, "I kind of know him. I can introduce you." And I went over there thinking that I was going to be a wing woman. And he completely like ignored and bypassed everything that I said and was like, "Hey, can I get your number?"
I knew what I wanted. I just knew exactly what I wanted. So from there on, I knew what I wanted. So from there, I got her number, and we started talking. We exchanged numbers, and we started talking for a few weeks, and then we stopped talking, and then so we weren't talking for like what about 6 months, and then we re-encountered
and reconnected.
We reconnected, and
at my friend's birthday party, his friend was DJing and I was the host. And so I guess him and his friend had a conversation about me. I still want to know what this conversation is.
Yeah, so we re-encountered at a little get together for a friend's birthday, and from there I told her, listen, after the whole night, I told her, hey, listen, I'm going to message you and we're gonna talk, because yeah.
And I didn't believe him.
What was
that?
By the end of the night, we started talking, and I believe very early on in our talking stage, we were talking about marriage.
So during that time, because we knew we wanted to get married and we were intentionally courting each other at that time, or he was intentionally courting me, really, we wanted to make sure that everything we did was pleasing unto God's eyes. So we made sure that we set boundaries and that everything that we were doing was, holy and acceptable to God. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure was to remain pure and abstain from having sex before marriage. Another, like a couple other boundaries that we had was like making sure that we didn't go into each other's houses, making sure we weren't alone with each other for long periods of time, making sure we weren't out with each other really late.
And also having that real conversation, because I know what can get me to the point, and being together for a long period of time, I know at some point I'm gonna try and do something. And so we had to be real with ourselves and, have that tough conversation. Okay, 20 tops, or certain things we're not gonna do, or even be this close to each other, only because we don't want to leave room for temptation to creep in, and for us to fall. And these are the type of conversations you need to have People think of it small, but it's actually very important. And we think that we can do it all by ourselves. Even as Christians, we say we can do it all by ourselves, but no, it is a power of God that can help us, or that gives us what's
The
that
strength.
word? The strength and self-control. So I had to be real. We had to be real with each other and be, and even sitting in the car for a long period of time, we had to kind of cut that time limit. Just certain things we couldn't do with each other, and so setting boundaries was like very vital.
And then aside from us setting boundaries, we made sure that we're praying over our relationship. Not in the sense of like, oh God, make this successful, but more so, God, let your will be done. Because a lot of the times people think, praying with each other and praying for each other are gonna be like, and another topic for another day, but people think that praying with each other and praying for each other are gonna be the determining factor in allowing for God allowing the relationship to happen, but that's far from the truth. So we wanted to make sure that we were praying for God's will, and in us praying for God's will, it was like, Lord, if this is your will, allow it to happen and allow it to work effortlessly. And then if it's not your will, like feel free to tear it apart, break it apart, whatever by any means necessary.
Yeah.
And that's literally the prayers that we prayed every single day.
Yeah, because
And
I'm sorry, but
no.
you can't pray for something, but your actions and the works that you do are in vain.
Yeah.
It has to be aligned. The Bible says faith without works is dead. So even the works that you do, even if it's in vain, if it's opposite of the prayers that you're doing, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, you can't be, shacking up and then praying, God, let your will be done, because you're stepping outside of the bed of marriage. And that's not what God intended it to be. If two are to be together, man and woman, that they should be under the covenant of marriage and acknowledged by God. And if that's not the case, then there's no reason for you to be praying those things and expecting it to work.
I think another one is character. I don't think people talk about that enough. Character is very important, even when it comes to how you treat the other person.
Yeah.
If you're praying for a relationship to work, but yet someone is not patient or isn't kind, that stuff is not okay. It's not okay.
Another big thing that is very that I witnessed in our relationship and um in the process of getting married is that when it came down to it, like for example, like we're not saying we're perfect. Although we didn't have sex before marriage, we did come very close. Um and it was in those moments that, we were both able to like step back, especially him. He was able to be like, no, I can't do this because you're a daughter of Christ and I don't want to do this to you. Like, I value you too much. And I think that's very important because a lot of the times we're like, we love you. I love you. Um, I want to be with you. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. And I think it's okay for me to do X, Y, Z because we're going to get married anyways.
Yeah.
But it actually does a disservice to not just your future spouse, but to God, because you're supposed to be treating them the way that God intended for you to treat them. And if you're not doing that according to the Bible, then you're not walking in what God is calling you to walk in, or you're not exemplifying the characters that God is telling you or requiring you to exemplify. So I think that in and of itself is very important, character, but also making sure that you're praying and you're setting boundaries. And when you're praying, that you're not just praying, let this relationship be successful, but that you're actually praying for God's will over your life and over the future relationship, if there is to be one.
Right. So abstinence and prayer was such a big thing for us. And not only that, but separating God's will and our will.
Yeah.
Being able to discern whether is this lust? Am I lusting after the relationship? Or is God actually calling us to marriage? Or is God approving what he has orchestrated for man to have? And I think that we can easily fall into lust when it comes to relationship, we can desire it so much. Are you putting that relationship before God? Are you so devoted into, are you praying more for the relationship more than you're praying to God? And so these are the questions that you have to ask yourself. And sometimes you may not even be able to see that it's happening. And that's why you must pray for discernment. Well, pray and that God will open your eyes that you may see, okay, have I put this before the Lord? Do I desire this more than I desire God? Do I desire this so much that there are things that I'm unwilling to give up for the sake of the person, well, for God, the person, and the purity of the relationship, because marriage is pure, marriage is a covenant. And if we fail to see that, then we disservice ourselves, or we move foolishly. And not only that, but what is love? People are getting into relationship and they don't understand, or they don't know the real definition of love. And love is pure, love is kind, love is patient. God is love. And so if we are not able to come to that realization, then we do ourselves a disservice when we're praying or we're praying for the service, and we're praying more for our will than God's will.
When it really came down to it, we had to allow God to put us in a position where we can separate our will from his will. And what I mean by that is, like, when we were talking about getting married, we were like, we're going to get married in a year. And she was like, no, we're going to get married like yesterday. And so like where we were on two different playing fields. And it's because, not because, we weren't meant for each other or anything like that. It was more so we had our own ideation of what we wanted our marriage to be like, rather than what God wanted our marriage to look like. That God had to literally prune us of those things, because we were like, oh, we want a big wedding. And then I was like, I want this and I want that. And he was like, no, but I want this and I want that. We're clashing constantly because we had our own idea. We had our own desires of what we wanted our marriage to be like. But for him, but for God, he was like, no, this is actually what I have in place for you. And so we were wrestling and we were going through all of these things in the span of 4 months. And um I want to say when we were like 3 months in, like we finally got to a point where we're like, where we're just gonna get married in December. And um I believe it was December 17th, and we are like, yeah, we're gonna finally get married in December, and we're just going to, get married. We're gonna have like a small ceremony, and then later on we're gonna do a big ceremony, and we're gonna invite all our friends and family. We just had this big idea of what it was gonna look like. And mind you, at the time we didn't have an apartment set in place. We had nothing set in place, nothing, no foundation set in stone. And that was one of the things that I was like, we need to get that in order before we get married.
Mhm.
And he was kind of on this page long before I was. But when we finally aligned with what God had for us, that's when the apartment fell into place, when our jobs like aligned. And this was like literally a month before we knew we were getting married. And we had December 17th already set in stone, like this is going to be the day that we get married. And the week that he got his apartment, the pastor that was officiating us told us that he wouldn't be able to do December 17th because the church that we were at, like, it was just this complication with the church that we were going to do it at. And so we were like trying to scramble to find another church, which was hard because we didn't really have the money for us to, scramble to find another church, because everything we had was going to like furniture and the deposit for the apartment and things like that. And so we're just like, we don't have it. And so I don't know how we got to this point, but we had like a mini meeting. It wasn't even really a meeting. It just happened to be at the same place at the same time. And we were talking about it, and they're like, well, the only other time that I'm available to do this is this day, and this day. And there were like a couple of dates that were after like after December, and he was not with it at all whatsoever. Like he was like, no, it has to be now.
Yeah, because I had just moved in the apartment, and so I was like, we're not gonna take no risks by you coming over and whenever you want.
Mhm.
It's either we get married now or we don't see each other anymore. So it was actually that Thursday we had a conversation, and we said, okay, we're gonna do this. And I think the dates that they had available was November 12th as
Yeah,
well.
that was like the only morning, the only immediate date that morning that he would be able to like officiate the wedding. And mind you, again, this is like something that we're like, oh, this is going to be very private. And we almost didn't go through with it because we were like, well, we got to invite family
Everybody.
and, you know, this is not enough notice. But we're like, you know what? We're just going to get married. Those who can make it will make it. And those who don't they'll just have to wait for the big ceremony that we have. And so we ended up doing it like that. And we got married November 12th in 2022. So a whole year after we exchanged numbers,
We got
we got
we
married.
got married, yeah. But this is not to teach anybody to be rebellious against your parents, but because we knew the will of God for our lives, and we knew that God had already said yes to us, like with dreams and confirmations to like it was back to back to back, and we were like, we know what God is doing. We know that God has said yes, and we're gonna do it.
And even then, like we were worried about like our families not being like, you know, with it, but like God worked it out with their hearts immediately. Like my mom wasn't for it at all whatsoever, and she was like no, and then she finally like met him. Mind you, again, like this is all happening within 4 months, a 4 months time period, and she meets him like probably a month after we became boyfriend and girlfriend. And I met his dad soon after, or a little before, I believe.
I think so.
I believe I met his dad a little before. I got to talk to his sister. I met his siblings. Like we literally allowed family to like get, in a sense, acclimated with the idea. And we were talking about marriage from the beginning, so our family already knew what we were like on. And like, of course, there was pushback at first,
A
pushback
lot
from
of
some
pushback,
friends,
friends and family.
but that's expected when you're gonna like when you're doing what God is calling you to do.
Something that something that the Lord had shared with me, even in the midst of all that, is be careful who you share the vision with, because there are people. It's not that people are against you, but people cannot see what the Lord is doing, or able to perceive that God is doing something new, or God is doing something. So the Lord, I remember so clearly, God said, be careful, because they will discourage you because they cannot see what I'm doing. And so that was something that we definitely had to be careful about, like who we talked to, who we were telling. And it's not that we couldn't,
Also him.
really, or definitely me. Um, but it's not that I couldn't tell nobody. It's just that they didn't understand. It's not that I didn't want to. God wasn't teaching. God was not teaching me to hate anybody or to be rebellious against anyone, but to be careful, because there are people who cannot understand what's happening, which is spiritual. What God was doing between us was definitely spiritual.
So again, when it comes to like, you know, when it came to telling our family members and our like friends, they were against it at first, but and it's expected when you're doing the will of God. But in that, God was able to like, you know, change their hearts and give us peace, because that was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Like we had peace in literally everything that we were doing. Granted, yes, there were times where like, you know, our family members weren't for it, or we like, you know, friends were like speaking against us and things like that, but it all in all, like we still had peace about the decisions that we were making, and about, you know, getting married. And the enemy definitely tried to like throw us off our game, but again, we're on the Lord's side, so that didn't really phase us, and it didn't really affect us either. So we ended up getting married literally that day, November 12th. Yeah, so that's pretty much our story.
Yeah. I mean, what would you say from your perspective as a woman was like key for you? Like what made you know for sure?
Um, well, aside from God confirming, to me, because he did a lot of the confirming to me, because I guess I needed it more. But just how intentional you were, um, about me, and not just saying like, oh, we're gonna get married and so whatnot, but it was more so, um, like you made sure that everything that you did or everything that we did was pleasing to God. And that was key for me because I'd had been in past relationships where purity and integrity weren't really a thing. Um and that was something that you like were like, no, we're gonna do this the right way. We're gonna do it like this. And you even made sure that like I set up a day to meet your mom. My mom, sorry. I set up a day to meet my mom, so that you can talk. And then you were like immediately brought me home to your dad. So I and your sister and brothers and stuff. So I think that for me was like, okay, you're really serious because um everyone else wasn't, or my past relationships weren't that big on the integrity and the purity and the honesty of, or the intentionality of the relationship. So
That's good. That's good.
what about you?
Um, for me, I just knew off that. I don't know. It's just this. I just knew. I don't know how to explain it. I just knew immediately, like, okay, I wanted to marry her. It was just this sense of purity, this cleanness about her that, I was like, that's who I want. And she was very nice, very kind, and she is very kind. She is very nice, and she's a servant at heart, bro. Such a servant at heart, and I really was like, did not just to me, but to people, and that for me was like the highlight. That was the highlight, and I was like, yeah, that's somebody that I want to pursue life with. Um, yeah, that was it for me. That was it for me.
So guys, if you like this video, please go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe, comment on any questions that you guys may have, and we could probably answer in the next video. Hit the notification bell so that you guys, are notified whenever we make a video.
Yeah.
And yeah, we love you with the love of the Lord.